Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host, and I am tickled today to have in our author series Heather B. Moore today with us. Hi, Heather. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Connie. Thanks for having me.
So delighted. Now, you may not recognize me because you may know her as H.B. Moore because some of her genres she writes under that name. But I just want to give you sort of the download of who this woman is. Prolific writer and a mother and a business owner. She is just seriously one of those people that I can't get over how you are able to do so many plates, spin them so well. And at the same time, if you don't know much about her, she's very free with her experiences and the wisdom that she's gained. She's not one of those that holds her cards close and thinks there's only a little bit of room at the top. She's very free with that, which has really shocked me, and because sometimes you don't always meet that. So Heather, again, I love that. So let me give you the basics so that you know who she is. She is a USA Today bestselling author. You should know that. An author of over 70 publications, like 70. Yeah, and a mother of 4. So just digest that for a moment. And her historical novels and thrillers, so great, are written under the pen name H.B. Moore. And she also writes women's fiction and romance and inspirational nonfiction, and that's other Heather B. Moore. And if you've seen any of her contemporary stuff, so great, and her anthologies, so great. So I love that she says, it can all be so confusing. Her kids just call her mom. And, that's what keeps us grounded, right? But
right.
What you may not know is Heather also attended the Cairo American College in Egypt and the Anglican School of Jerusalem in Israel. I mean, talk about, she's also well-traveled, and a BS degree, a Bachelor of Science from Brigham Young University. She's also multi-award winner. So literary awards, she's had the Maggie Award winner, 6-time Best of State recipient for Best in Literary Arts, 4-time Whitney Award winner, and 2-time Golden Quill Award winner. Now, she's probably dying over here going, would you just move along? But I want to share that because as an author, these kinds of things are, in our industry, that's really saying you have achieved an ability to write and to do so in so many genres. It's really mind-blowing. So I want to give you that concept of the person we're talking with today, that you can understand how she has achieved credibility and its success in so many of these areas. And that's why you want to listen really closely to your speaker about what this woman has to share. So let's just jump right in. Let's give it the usual token question. Okay. How in the world did you go from being in, Middle East and then coming into this writing thing? Where did this whole writing thing begin for you?
So for me, I started writing my first book when I was 30 years old. What? So that's almost 20 years ago. I have always been a huge reader. I loved to read even when I was 10, 11, 12. The library had a limit of checking out 12 books at a time, so I would go check out 12 books. I didn't always read all of them. I remember going on summer vacations or fishing trips with my family, and I'd just bring my stack of books and start plowing through them. So I really think I just had a love for books and a love for reading and character arcs and plot arcs, but I wasn't really thinking, oh, I'm going to be a writer someday, or I want to publish a book. I remember one of my neighbors gave me a book written by a local Utah author, and I read it and I thought, well, wait a minute, this is not a romance. It's not historical. It was not a thriller. It was just a good story. And this author doesn't live in New York. They're not, living in LA on a beautiful cliff in a mansion. And I thought this is just a normal person living in Utah. And I don't know why it never really clicked until then. But I thought, wow, maybe I could do something like this. I wasn't necessarily thinking writing a book, but I had some stories in mind, and I wrote a couple short stories and submitted them to magazines. Like back then, magazines like Good Housekeeping, they would publish novellas.
Yes.
In them. I don't remember that, but I don't know. I was just thinking it would be kind of cool just because I read this magazine all the time, and it'd be cool to have something in there. And so I started writing a story, and it went on and on and on and on and on. And it was basically this woman's whole life story, and it ended up being 300 pages. And I had no idea what to do with it. So back then, this is, almost 20 years ago, and Google was, I don't even know if Google was around, but you could search the internet. And so I did some internet searches, and I found a group called the League of Utah Writers, and they had a chapter meeting not far from me at a library So I went to that meeting, eventually had my kids were really little. I had to, arrange, make sure my husband's home and all that kind of stuff. And so I went to this meeting, and I remember just listening to the speaker that night. It was actually Jeff Savage, who he's an author that a lot of people know. And he talked about his publishing story. And for some reason, I have no idea where this thought came from. And it wasn't meant to be ironic or anything, but I just thought, well, if he can do it, I can do it. And I have no idea why I had even had that sort of confidence. And of course, the journey was very long, very rocky. I wrote 3 books before I got one published. And I changed genres a lot. And I finally, got a book out, but it was a very long process to do that. So that's kind of where it just started. It was just sort of this idea that percolated. It wasn't something I had as a lifelong goal, but once I started writing, I was literally hooked. In fact, on nights that my kids were in bed, and they're pretty little, so they go to bed pretty early, and my husband is traveling, I'd have maybe 2 or 3 hours at night before I drop into bed as well. And instead of reading, which is like my favorite thing to do, or maybe catching a TV show, I just felt this draw to just write, and it just became what I'd rather do in my spare time than anything else. So it really turned into a passion.
Isn't that crazy? So I love, for people listening, if you haven't had this lifelong dream, since you were 12 or whatever,
Right.
that it can happen, especially even as a mother. And I had that same experience where it was kind of after having kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it was that, I don't know for you as a mom, but I needed a release. I needed something. I loved my kids, but it was that same stuff every day, and it was stressful. And I needed a release of something I could control, an environment, a world that I could go into, and then kind of, an escape, so to speak, but in a good way. I mean, loving the life that I had, but still. And I love that all of the reading you did as a child played into that, because you're exactly right. You don't realize that as you're reading all these books, that you're learning about plot and character arc like that. I remember reading Harriet the Spy, and it changed my life forever. As a 6th grader, you start seeing the world in different ways, and that all comes into play. I love that you share how this one sort of eye-opening thing led to another. I had the same experience where I went to an ANWA meeting, and I ended up meeting Rachel Anderson, and she wasn't going to come back to another one because she was kind of phasing out. And that led to me getting my first book published. So one thing leads to another, and I think you can agree. When you have an interest in writing, getting into those groups, and I know you're a big proponent of story makers, I am too, which is one of the biggest writing conferences. I think it's on the West Coast, but definitely for sure in Utah. But you have 700 people gathering, and all of you talking, writing, and learning, and it's crazy fabulous. And that was a big proponent for a lot of people of getting serious about writing and this craft. So let me kind of go into this now. You got these ideas, you're doing these different genres. How did this whole experience in the Middle East start to play into you? Because your family lived there, and you've co-authored a book, I think at least one, with your father, who is a professor. Is that right?
Right.
So tell us a little bit about that journey of making that into sort of these historical thrillers and using that as a base.
Right. So I think you hear a lot of write what you know in the publishing industry. And I do agree with that. I also want to change that a little bit to write what you are passionate about. And I think definitely living in the Middle East when I was both 7 and 8, and then again when I was a teenager in high school, that definitely opened my eyes a lot. And it gave me maybe some underlying, I guess, sort of like I knew about the culture. I knew a lot more than maybe people that hadn't lived there knew. And it was also very intriguing. I found like Egyptology and archaeology, like all that very, very intriguing. Would go to these museums, especially in Cairo, and would go to like Giza and see the pyramids and the Sphinx and stuff. And so even though I was writing in historical fiction, my first books that were published were based on ancient scriptures. So that obviously brought in some of that culture as well. But I wanted to do something more. And so I started writing a thriller series. The nice thing about my dad being a scholar, he's a biblical scholar. His PhD is in New Testament studies. And so in all my thrillers, I actually have a little bit of a religious angle. And he still is a great person. I would call him or email him. And the thing about my dad is he is so extensively read. He would say something, well, in the 4th century BC, there's a scholar that said this. And he literally could remember from reading all of his books. And so that saved me a lot on not necessarily just like going to Google and just having random links pop up, but I have like a focused direction to go. And he hasn't read all my thrillers, but I would send him pieces of it and say, what do you think about this? And sometimes his comment would be, well, you can't really say it was cold during the night, but you can say it was cool. Like he was very specific about certain things. But like you said, like it definitely spurred a love for the culture and the people, and I was able to create characters that embraced their upbringings and their culture, and then take it from there.
Oh, so fantastic. And that flavor, that genuine authenticity, where you read books, sometimes you can say, oh, somebody did a whole lot of research, because they're just like dumping the research, right? But yours is just so woven in so naturally. And I think that's just that beautiful, authentic element. And then how lovely to share that together as, father and daughter, to have that connection. I just think that's, again, it's beautiful. Some people fish, some people, bake and cook, and then you write these things together. I think it's beautiful. Right. And for anyone who has not read her nonfiction, I love the historical. I've read Women in the Book of Mormon, and she has her series. Esther is one of the newest ones that have come out, Abinadi, all of these that you can go through, and you get that historical fiction flair and feel for potentially how this may have turned out. Ruth, where some of those things for sure, maybe didn't exactly happen that way, but it gives you that feel of being there. And I learned so much about the culture and appreciating what lives of women were like back then and what the reality was, so that when I'm reading scripture, it really does help me to understand, oh, this is why they would say this or do this, or these challenges they were facing. So I love it. And it's in a really palatable way. Kind of going along those lines of these different offshoots, you've also done these anthologies. What made you decide to get into anthologies, which is bringing in other women and doing collections? I love, one of my favorites is the Autumn collection. Yeah, shameless plug. But there's all of this European collections, all of these different collections. How has that experience helped you as a writer? And what has it been like for you, kind of doing this collab with others? Because that's a different experience than just sitting and writing in an isolated way.
Well, I honestly think it's the best of both worlds, because writing is very solitary. And a lot of times when you write a book, you don't know if it's good until you have a reader go through it or it gets to the editorial stage. So when you collaborate, you're going back and forth. And so it's kind of like a live action writing project. And so I love doing things on my own, because there's only my expectations, but I also love doing anthologies. That's kind of maybe the difference between a solo sport, like being a runner, or playing on like a volleyball team. Like they're different experiences, but you love them both because they're both, competitive, and you can both keep growing in each. And I think I've grown as a writer, because doing these anthologies, I'm always trying to not only up my writing level, but also trying out new genres. For instance, all the anthologies that we have, they're all sweet romance, but we'll take like a theme, or maybe they'll be historical or contemporary, or maybe they'll be specific Regency. And that way I have to kind of stretch and grow and go research the genre, go read a bunch of maybe Sarah Eden books who writes Queen Regency, and figure out how does she use our turn of phrases, what's their clothing like, what's their setting like, what's their culture, what's the male-female relationship like. So it has really, even though these are anthologies and they're just collections of shorter novellas, each one has really taught me how to grow as a writer.
I love that. And I love that theme that keeps coming, kind of weaving through what you're talking about. It is the stretching and growth. And I agree that as a writer, the experiences that we are having with new cultures and people, and I started taking tennis lessons and voice lessons, and I've already got ideas for stories on this, because
nice.
It starts to broaden you, kind of that Harry Potter, broaden your mind. But yes. It does, and it creates this growth. And I love that you test the waters, like Regency, finding out what does that mean to cut direct and a blue stocking and those kinds of
Right.
things. Figuring out, okay, I can branch out here. And then people who love your writing style can now get a different flavor, and they vicariously can experience these new things and open up their world to maybe they didn't do Regency before and only did sweet romance, but now
Right.
they can, tap into that. And I love in the anthologies, you get 6 different writers' style so that
Right.
you get a little taste. It's like, to me, it's like a little hors d'oeuvre buffet. And you get the sampler, like a Costco sampler, if I can make
Yes.
it, not too cheesy, but you sample it and then you go, ooh, I like this person's writing. And then you can take that chance and then get more of what you love. Now that kind of begs the question then, anthologies, then you're the one that's running the back end of that. You also have an editing company. Tell us a little bit about that, of going into the business side of writing, because a lot of different women, I do a course for people, helping them become an influential writer, speaker, and media personality.
Right.
And one of the biggest questions they have for me is, what do I do with, I love the passionate side of writing, but what about how I go about the marketing and the business side and all of that? How have you navigated, you've done it so well, how have you navigated this business side of really marrying both?
Yeah, well, when I first started out, obviously I was a writer for a publisher, and so that was pretty straightforward. And then when I decided to self-publish or indie publish the anthologies, I had to figure out, okay, do I need a business license? Do I need all these things? And so it was really just researching it. And I have a little bit of a business background. I majored in fashion merchandising at BYU, and I minored in business management. And the thing with fashion merchandising is maybe not everybody realizes, but it really is a business. Almost all your classes are business, and they're focused on like marketing too. And so what I found as far as marketing goes is there's a lot of great books out there on book marketing, but you could read a whole book and only have like 2 or 3 takeaways that will work for you. You have to just find what works for you and your style and what you're comfortable with, especially when you're marketing yourself. That's a hard thing to do, is kind of find your little niche in the world. So I found that with sweet romance, and I feel really comfortable marketing that. And for more like to go on the business side, I really like the business side. I do like the creative side too, and I think that taps into my love of reading. Is, to me, reading a good book is not much different than the actual process of writing a book. It's the same kind of creation and imagination process. But when I was a kid, again, another kid story, I would get stuff from my grandparents in their house that they didn't want, like a stapler or a stamp or a pack of receipts, and I'd play Office in my room, and that was just really fun for me to play Office. And I still love to go, mostly on shopping's online now, but I would love to go to the store and get a fresh pack of Post-it notes or a new box of paper clips. I know that's kind of weird, but
Yeah, I am so with you. I'm like, I love walking into Staples. Just the smell of the stuff and the looking at all the supplies. I'm like, yeah, something is seriously wrong with me.
Yeah.
I'm laughing because I used to do the same thing. My stepdad worked at a courthouse, and I would go in and I'd make files, and I would like do phone receipts and stuff. Isn't it funny how the things that you're drawn to as a child, and I think for people listening, go back to that. Go back to what drew you as a child and what you have found joy in, because you still can find a way to do it now. And I'd love to chat about that for a minute. As you've morphed through these different iterations of what you're doing, how have you done that with family? Because like you said, little kids and then teenagers, and you have one that's still at home, but still, they need us, but just in different ways. Is there any tips or tools that you could offer to people listening that says, you know what, this has been a help for me?
Right. I think one of the biggest help things I had is when I first became interested in writing. I thought, okay, I'm really writing a book. I have no idea what I'm doing. Is I looked, UVU had some continuing education. The catalog would come to my house, and there is like a little workshop on publishing taught by Rachel Nunes. And I went to that, and it was at some library somewhere. It was just like a 2-hour workshop. And she sat there and she said, sometimes I don't even get dressed. And I was like, what? She's like, some days I don't even shower. And it was just mind blowing to me. And sometimes my kids eat hot dogs all week. And I thought, you can do that. And I know it sounds dumb, but for me, it was just an eye opener. And then she also said that she set a word count goal she wrote like 5 days a week, and she set a word count goal. I think it was 2,000 words a day. And she says, I could do that literally in an hour of focused time, or it can take me all day with interruptions. And so I had never thought of looking at writing as it's okay to maybe loosen my grip or control over a few things. And then also make it more structured. And so I found I'm fairly organized and fairly structured. So for me, I thrive in that, and some people don't. But for me, I still set, I mean, I have however many books out, I still set word count goals every day, and I stick to them. Now that my kids are older, you would think, oh, well, yeah, you know, your last kid, she goes to high school and she's gone from 8 till 2, and you have like 6 hours. And it's like, no, I do not have, I feel like I still am like always racing the clock. Like by 10 o'clock in the morning, I feel literally like breathless with all the things I still have to do that day. It's just, life just takes control. So if you don't take a slice of that control back, and I've really had to learn that. And there's sometimes, so an example is my first book finally came out, and I was doing book signings on the weekends, and which was hard because I was trying to, my little boy, he was like playing soccer, so I was trying to make sure it wasn't conflicting with his cute little games. And people would say, well, when's your second book coming out? Because it was a series. I said, oh, well, next year sometime. And I thought maybe I should email my publisher and find out when I should turn in that book. And so it's like the middle of September. And I emailed them, and they said, your next book has to be in by December 1st. And I'm like, this year? And I thought, okay, the first book I had, I mean, I had written other books, but the first book I had published, I had spent like 6 months writing it, almost a year before it got accepted, and another like 9 months before it came out. So the previous book was like a 2.5 year journey. And I'm like, now I have, let's see, like I was literally counting a day, October, November, 2.5 months to have this book not only written, but good enough to be published. And I really just took it as a matter of prayer. And I looked at my schedule. I had little kids. My oldest was 10. My youngest was about 4 months old. And I decided I was going to follow what Mary Higgins Clark did. So this is where reading comes, is I read her memoir. And when she was widowed with like 4 or 5 children, and she was following her dream of writing, she wrote from 4 to 7 in the morning. And that's what I did for 2 months, is I wrote from 4 to 7 in the morning. And it was a big sacrifice on sleep. And sometimes I had my nursing baby with me, but it really taught me that I could do it. When I set my mind to it, and this was a dream and a passion, I could do it. But it also taught me, don't put myself in that corner again. So I learned a lot of valuable lessons from that experience.
I love that. And I love the point that you make, because I think there's probably a lot of women listening that are thinking, oh, I could never do that. I want to, but I've got this and the kids and I got life and this is happening. And not realizing that with a few, tweaks and absolute commitment, that it really can happen. And I think most women would say that, I've interviewed Josie Kilpack, and when you talk to Sarah and you talk to these different women,
right,
they've had to get up early or stay up late. And
right,
the sacrifice has been worth it in the long run, in the sense that they've had more ability and energy and passion to do daily life, because they've had this juiciness that's come from still tapping into them as a woman and what their fingerprint is that they want to leave on this life, kind of thing, this creative aspect. So I love that you bring that up. And I remember doing a book in 2 weeks. I had to do an ebook that had to get out. And I was like, that's not going to happen. There's no way I could do it. And, different people, Angela Ashler, as you well know, helping all these different people, helping to make something happen. And I learned an important lesson that I think that you're alluding to is, when you take the step and you make the commitment, the doors start opening. People show up, and ways start to be made clear of how you can do something. It's not the reverse. You don't wait for those and then go, okay, now I can do it.
Right.
So I love that you bring that up, because otherwise I'm guessing 70 books would not have happened, right?
Right.
I love this idea too, that if we can kind of dovetail into some of these unexpected things of writing. If you could think back over this, right? And I love the fact that you didn't start until you were 30. It reminds me of Julia Child. She didn't start cooking until she was like 60s, right?
Right.
I love that this possibility, but then this unexpected. What has been maybe a few things or something that that has been the biggest surprise for you in being an author and doing the business part of, all of these other hats that you wear? Maybe what's been a biggest surprise for you?
Well, I think there's been a lot of surprises. Like I did not, a lot of people that are writers will say, oh, this is my tribe. And I didn't know I was missing a tribe. I mean, I was just, going through my life, and I loved to do crafts. I loved sewing. I made all my girls' Christmas dresses and Halloween costumes. And so I was just kind of content. But when I added the writing and then eventually publishing aspect, I realized that I felt like I had found I know we all have a purpose in our life, but I felt like I had found kind of the icing on the cake as far as what my purpose was. And maybe other authors have said this, but my very close friends now, they're all writers. We share a lot of the same ideals. We go through a lot of the same experiences, a lot of the same ups and downs, and so we have that close bond relationship. And really, I feel like, and a lot of writers like me, we're more introverted and we're more quiet. And I've learned, though, to express myself better. I've learned to be in a room and be social. When I'm at a book signing, I have to learn to talk about my book. In fact, my very first book signing, I was sitting there in a Sokol book, and I would tell people about my book, but I wouldn't say I was the author. And then one person said, "Oh, wait, you're the author?" And I was, "Why? Yes, I am." And that taught me that I need to be sharing who I was more. And people will come up and say, "Hey, I read your book and I loved it." And at first it was just, I felt really awkward and embarrassed, and I kind of feel like I was blushing. But now I've learned to kind of, I guess, communicate better, because I'm communicating through the written word, but as a person, I was still a very quiet, introverted person. I've learned to kind of bridge that and become, I guess, grow more into who my true self is.
I love that. And isn't that what we want to be as people,
Right.
and as women? We want to be our full and whole selves and not suppress or keep back out of embarrassment or worry about how other people will take that. And what a beautiful way that that's come about through this writing, how it's bloomed you. And then the way that it can influence your kids. They're active, they do lots of fun stuff, that they see that confidence in their mom. I know my kids have said that to me, and I've seen that in them, that they've garnered more confidence because they've seen me have to do hard things, or just like that, where you're like, I have to own this. I have to, if someone comes up at Macy's and you're like in the grocery store, like, are you Connie Sokol or whatever? And you're like, like you're just kind of like, okay, was I just yelling at my children? Like, what was I just doing? But I think it's beautiful, because the more that we own this as women, wives, mothers, sisters, aunts, the more we can say, this is the whole package, and you can be the whole package. And that's coming into and stepping into our purpose and who we are and fulfilling that. And what beautiful dominoes are, fall down in beautiful ways because of that. I love this. And any other thoughts, any other things that for those listening out there, is there anything that you're like, if anybody wants to be an author out there, or they're really thinking about it, this is this one thing I'd love to share with them?
I think there's a difference. I think you need to know this. I also learned this in my critique group. I think it was my first time I went, and I said something about how I really wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't sure. And one of the ladies in the group said, "Heather, did you just write this chapter?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Then you're a writer." And so one thing is just finding that belief in yourself. And it's really tough to do, especially when you're doing something public, like writing and putting a book out there, whether you're self-publishing or you're going through a publisher. You're going to get a lot of negativity and criticism. So I really try to approach my writing prayerfully, so that when those storms come and the waves crash along the sands, that you still have your rock foundation. You still know why you wrote that book, and you feel good about that book, and you're proud of that book. So that's probably one thing, is a lot of times we, in the writing world, we're like, oh, these are all the steps to get published, and do all this editing and get your query ready, and look at agents and look at publishers. And then I can't tell you how many times I've been in, like, maybe a Facebook group or another writer group, and someone is talking about when their first book is launching or their next book is launching, and they're literally just frozen with anxiety because they have so many doubts. And I think we don't talk about that very much because people don't want to admit that, oh, I just got this deal and I've been bragging it about for a whole year, and I have this amazing publisher, and I'm supposed to be grateful, I'm supposed to be on top of the world, but I'm petrified.
Yeah.
So I've gone through that a lot. So that would be the one thing is just prayerfully approach your career, and keep that confidence in yourself and try not to look at the negativity in the world.
I love that. And the last thing I want to ask you kind of segues
Okay.
from that and just adds right to it, that how has your faith and in your religious beliefs, how has that helped you to stay grounded? So you talk about prayerfully approaching your projects.
Mm-hmm.
How else has that helped you in this, industry that can be all over the place? How has that specifically helped you be grounded?
It helps me a lot because I think it helps me just to get through the day-to-day grind. And writing or any sort of career that I feel like is kind of a freelance career, I think is not always totally well respected. If I told my neighbor, I'm going to go write or have to write today. Oh, okay, Heather's going to be, on her couch, whatever. But if I say, oh, I have to go to work or I'm going to go teach first grade today, that for some reason, those professions just have that sense of, oh, those are real jobs. And so, I think one thing that prayer has helped me is to just keep reaffirming. There's been times when I have been very discouraged and I've been praying almost like I need a sign or I need some sort of a message that will tell me I'm still on the right path and this is still the right path. And I've had those signs or messages come through that have assured me that I am still on the right path. And I just think with everything in life, when you're prayerful, that also helps, like you mentioned earlier, that helps the right things fall into place. And there's times when I don't get my word count goal done, there's those days that happen frequently. And I just have to take a step back and say, it's okay. God is in charge. I'm not in charge. If I am still approaching this prayerfully, this goal will get done. And it may not happen in the exact time frame that I set, but it will happen in the right time frame.
Oh, so beautifully put. And I think that is the real journey of a real writer, is that, some people talk about you got to follow your muse and all of that. And yet, especially for women, I think we realize early on, it is about the whole. It is
Right.
being a woman, wife, mother, aunt, sister, all at the same time,
Right.
and still being able to get the word count, right?
Yeah.
And I think the best and really only way to do it that will keep that joy and lose a lot of the anxiety is to know he is in charge and that he will and can make up the difference as is needed. And I have found that over and
Mm-hmm.
over, that brings that peace. And
Yep.
then I don't know, I'm sure you found that, later on, then one thing falls into and another thing, and it turns out that it all worked out and it worked
Right.
out great, and sometimes even better. And I don't
Yeah.
know about you, probably not for you, but some different projects, I was like, I've got to get this out. And then I look back, I didn't get it out. And I'm like, I'm so glad. That
Right.
one needs to stay in the drawer because that does not need to be out there. So
Right.
I love the real authentic things that you have shared with us today. And just for those who have joined us late, I just want to recap just a couple of things that she shared, that one of the great anchors that she had was being a huge reader, especially as a child. And that I think that adage is so true. The best writers are the best readers. That getting into groups and connecting with people, Story Makers, League of Utah Writers, ANWA, all of these organizations don't just give us a boost and information, which is so important and so helpful, but it gives that credibility and that validation to what we're doing, and then opens up doors as well and gives us that encouragement of, yeah, you are a writer, you can do this. Taking the next step of whatever that is, maybe it's changing genres or pushing through to it's stretching yourself in other ways, doing something you're passionate about, getting the growth of what you're doing and relishing that growth, not thinking, oh, now I got to do something else and it's a chore. So I love that, finding your niche and building on that. And then I love the specific of setting a word count goal of, it can be as simple as just setting that thing and keeping your eye on that prize for the day. And then lastly, I love that finding and fulfilling your purpose as a writer and connecting with that tribe so that you can help one another fulfill that purpose together. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. Hopefully you're taking this yummy, delicious buffet that she's just given us today, and you're going to sup on that and feel the goodness of you moving forward for you listeners in your writing or whatever it is, painting or whatever it might be, photography, but moving forward in those same steps. If people listening, they want to hear more, they want your books, where are the best places for them to catch up with you?
Really anywhere, especially with COVID going on right now. Amazon's a great place, Barnes and Noble. I know that some bookstores are opening. As far as Utah, Sokol Book, Desert Book, the libraries are a great place. If most libraries have my books, you could also do an interlibrary loan or library request through them if you want to go that way.
Fantastic. And what's the next book that's coming out? I know you just had the paper.
Yeah. So I actually have it here. So this one comes out in September. And I'm really excited about this. It's about a woman who worked at a mission home, a Presbyterian mission home in San Francisco in the early 1900s. And she helped to rescue Chinese women from slavery and prostitution. So it's a historical story about basically a woman who is a pioneer in her day for women's rights. And I also have a scriptural novel, biblical novel that comes out in November on Mary and Martha. So it was definitely a joy and a blessing to write that one.
I cannot wait. And Esther had just come out this several months ago. And this one is called The Paper Daughters of
Chinatown.
Chinatown, that was it. I was like, I know it's China, but I know there's something else there. The Paper Daughters of Chinatown, how fantastic. And it's so timely in this day when we're dealing with trafficking and all of these things, that how beautiful and how inspiring this woman took so much upon her to do that. And you even went to San Francisco, didn't you? And saw where she had kept them.
Right. So the mission home she worked at, it's still there. And they're a community service center, and they have counseling sessions. They have youth groups for kids, and they serve the community still. So it's pretty neat.
That is so beautiful. I remember you saying that she would unlock like 7 locks on the door or something like that, just so that gave time for the girls to hide. I mean, these beautiful, real details of real people, just lovely. And that is such a signature of all of your work, is that research, and then you have that gift of flowing it into historical fiction. Just love it. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. Again, ladies, this is Heather Moore, or HB Moore, depending on which genre you're seeking. Beautiful, fun, wonderful stuff. You're going to learn, you're going to laugh, you're going to cry, you're going to feel loved. It's just beautiful. If you want more on this author series, subscribe below, rate, review, check it out at conniesokol.com. I also have my TV segments, blog posts, programs, free challenges to help you get purpose, organization, and joy, and live the kind of life you want to do. So remember, today, take the next step to step into your purpose-filled life.